number one thing was the chime tower.
Yep. So to start with the chime tower, so some of the internals have already been removed and are being restored. You know, your committee voted to keep the one additional bell. You know, that was added in 1970s. So, because I remember there was a pitch to expand the bells, but that was not approved. Verdun was bids went out. Verdun was awarded the bid. They have already built the new racking system for the bells, and they built it in their plant in Cincinnati. They will be installing the new racking system September 26th through October 5th. So that they'll be in there doing that.
And when do they take down the old bells, Mike? When they're doing that, will that be happening?
Yep, they'll be in and out. The bells will come out, and they're going to be brought down to the DPW stored in the new building, because it's what we realize is it's not a long-term storage. They're going to take them out, take out the old racking system, put the new racking system in, put the bells in, and then they'll rewire the bells with the new cables and that for the playing of it, and it'll be done. So
wow, that's awesome.
That portion of the project will be done. Then we were going to go out to bid for next spring. So next season will be the cupola work, where we will take down the top, or not take it down, rebuild the top. And I'm waiting to get the final stuff from EDM and then run it past your committee and others to get everybody's buy-in on this is exactly what we want to do. I remember there was a meeting there with Carlos from the engineering about finding the right, trying to find the best matching slate for the roof and the rest. So, yeah.
If we get in trouble with the slate, I think we can do what we started to do for the town offices and put the bad slate on the backside.
Right. You had mentioned that to me, and I would make sure to have them do that. Right.
Because if there's, what I understood is we cannot obtain this actual slate anymore because that quarry is closed. Okay. That's just something to keep in mind.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds really great, Michael. So theoretically, like somebody could play music sometime in October?
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
The musical instrument component of the building will be completed. Yep.
And that obviously includes the I forget what they call it, the chime stand, I think, whatever the thing is.
The chime stand and the rest. They were going to incorporate that extra lever in better than it was. If you remember, somebody had just sort of screwed it on as an attachment and that. So, yeah.
When you said some stuff had been removed already to be worked on, is that maybe the chime stand in that category?
The chime stand, and they took out the running cables, the old cables that ran up to the bells that have been stretched, and the rest that wouldn't work. So, you know, that's the part that Verdun was making the replacing.
That's great.
Yeah. They came out, that was in the spring, they came out and removed those items, and that took their final measurements, and then, like I said, they fabricated the new racking system, and now it'll be the installation of it. Yep.
Fabulous.
Okay, so do we want to just move ahead? The next item was that George Washington plaque.
It's in my office.
No,
Excellent.
Yes.
It's in unless it got moved recently, it's in Roxanne's office.
Yeah, Roxanne had asked, she was in, so Roxanne resigned as in the CO for the COA director position.
Oh.
So I grabbed I didn't want it just sitting in there depending on who else was. So it's now in my office and that. So we have it. What do we want to do with it?
Is it possible to put a display cabinet out in the front hall next to George Washington's statue out there and put it in?
I don't see why not.
And to add something else into a display cabinet, there's 3 plaques down in the Proctor Hall that will probably go in a dumpster if somebody doesn't rescue them. One is to the flags, one is to Williams, and then there's one to Proctor upstairs that should
Can we
be
come,
taken.
can we go back to Proctor Hall in just a minute? I kind of want to finish the George Washington situation because it occurs to me if we're going to do any kind of display there in the town hall, this is a really good time to get the Stockbridge Muncie connection brought up because of George Washington giving that community the ox, which was King Solomon's feast. And this was the reward to this group for having supported the American side in the revolution. So I think we might want to put together a George Washington display relevant to the town and make sure that we include anything else. There may be more George Washington than I don't know about Stockbridge, but I think we have, the other problem is the stand that the plaque was on still out in front of the town hall? I didn't have a chance to look.
I'm not aware of any stand out in front. So
It maybe
it was on a little concrete or cement block that was slightly larger than the plaque, not too much larger than the plaque.
I wonder if it got taken out when the tree went down.
What tree? The tree that was with the plaque?
Mm-hmm.
No, that was a long time ago. The tree got out.
But the plaque
you have
stayed.
a photograph, Maria.
I have a photograph
Yeah.
before it was hit with the lawnmower, and it's on this little stand kind of thing out there, which I don't think has any significance. But
So yeah, maybe we don't want to use that anyway.
Okay, so if there's no stand, we don't need to worry about it being outdoors. Okay.
And Maria,
Well,
I recall you have some good historical research you did about, I'm frankly a little vague now what the research is, so if you can remind us, I think it's in your book about the plaque in George Washington and Stockbridge.
it was a national thing. They put out a proclamation or something that every town, every city, even beyond the United States, would celebrate George Washington by doing parades, balls, all this different kind of thing during a period of time. And yeah, I wrote it all up in my book. And it evidently in the town reports back then, I found information of some of the things that Stockbridge did do. So,
do you remember what year that was roughly?
I can tell you.
And so, yeah, I think, I mean, obviously this will be an evolving work, but I think one thought we had, Michael, is, and maybe integrating Linda's good thoughts about the Muncie community would be to have some sort of a narrative. I don't know what the right word is, but written words in this display case that would tell some of this history and so forth.
It was 1932.
32. That sounds about right.
I mean, I guess I would say here, this is if your committee wants to put together exactly, I guess, what you'd like to see in it, obviously we can, that would dictate what type of case we would want to put in there. Are we building a case into the wall? Are we, is it just a display case that's hung on the wall? Is it, I guess first figure out the parameters of what you want to do and then go from there. But I think there's a whole bunch of options as far as how we would display something. I think it just depends on what exactly the items are we're displaying we have to build around.
Makes
I think
sense.
that's good. I think we should put that on an agenda for a future meeting. And I'll review all that material that came from Mount Vernon to us and see if there's anything else. There's quite an extensive amount of correspondence and documentation. Rick Wilcox also has it. So I think we could do well by that.
You could almost, if you look out in the front hall where the statue is located, you could almost do a display cabinet, one on each side of him. It would balance it out, and you could have one strictly for George, and the other one could possibly be for these plaques coming out of the Proctor Hall. And there's also a plaque that's in storage in the town offices for, it was supposed to go up in Proctor Hall and it didn't go up, and they brought it back and it was stored in Georgia Marston's office. So it's probably in your office, Michael, for the French person. I can never pronounce his name. Tocqueville, and it was given to the town by C-SPAN.
I haven't
And
seen that.
it's a good sized plaque. So, I mean, it's got to be like 18 by 12 or something. So, and it was slid in beside a file cabinet when Georgia was there, and she took it out and let me photograph it. But it's in my book also. So,
Do you have that book, Michael?
Which one's this?
Maria has a new book out that has
this one.
there it is.
It's
That's
a
something to be in the town
compilation of
offices
every
somewhere.
monument and plaque in the town of Stockbridge.
I don't. The only book I have is the hardcover book that the town of
Stockbridge
Stockbridge.
story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I think the town should have a copy right there in the office, because also along with the Secretary of Interior standards, which Patrick said he was ordering, but I have not seen it. It's available digitally, but it's always great to shove it across the table to somebody if they don't understand what it is.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah, my book is just under 400 pages, and it lists every plaque and monument and memorial in the town that I could possibly find.
all right.
And it has a paragraph or two of the history behind it. So,
And
All right.
Maria, so just back to that most recent plaque that we're not sure where it is right now. It was at Tocqueville. And who gave it to the town?
C-SPAN gave it to
C-SPAN.
the town when they
Why
were
did C-SPAN?
retracing his trip through the United States, and they came to Stockbridge, and they presented it to they interviewed Polly Pierce because she was curator at the time, and they gave this plaque, and it states the 25-year-old French aristocrat and author of Democracy in America visited this area during his 1831 to 32 tour of America. And then it goes on to say it was given by C-SPAN in the year 1997-98. Yeah, he was a French diplomat, and he came over and did this thing all through the United States, and he did.
Yeah, he's famous. That's a famous book. Did he like stop in Stockbridge and like write anything about Stockbridge?
I don't know if he wrote anything. He did stop in Stockbridge. He stopped in Stockbridge to meet with Catherine Sedgwick, but she wasn't there at the time, and he met with Theodore Sedgwick instead. And a few years later in Paris, France, Sedgwick helped Tocqueville, however you pronounce that, write the first volume of his 2-volume Democracy in America.
Wow, that's
so
awesome.
There's a definite Stockbridge connection. If you can't find the plaque, I would talk to Georgia, because she was the one that showed me where it was. She showed Helen Pickett and me where it was, slid in beside the cabinet, and we gave us the opportunity to photograph it. So.
Can you send Michael a picture of the plaque? I might be able to do that. Actually, I could just take a picture of it in the book and send it to him.
Yeah, I can. I've got it on my computer, so I can send that page.
Yeah, send it over to me, and I'll take a look around. We'll take a look around and see, and if not, I regularly speak to Georgia. I'll ask her if she knows where it is.
Yeah.
So to
I know
move,
we've switched offices and other stuff around, so it's not always,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the 3 plaques down at Proctor Hall should be rescued before they start demolishing and throwing
It's-
things away.
the
Could
next
you
step,
send Michael pictures of those too, Maria?
Yeah, I can.
I want to talk about that in a larger context for just a moment. Two things, archival storage for some of these things. And the second thing, Michael, is what is the situation with Proctor Hall right now? Do we have any further knowledge about the sale or transaction there?
So my understanding is that the sale is pretty close to happening between the congregation, between the church, not the church and the Waldorf school.
Mhm.
The town's position in this, that we're sort of operating a little different than we did when it was put out before, is that the fact that the land lease has expired, we are not using it as a town hall, therefore the town, it has no value to the town. We can't rent it. We can't do anything with it without having control of the ground lease. The anticipation is that the church will notify the town once the sale happens that we're no longer in a ground lease with them. And at that time, the town has to decide if it's going to contest through the select board, contest that. And right now, the plan is not to contest it. That has no value. And therefore, the building would go back to the church. The church would sell it to Wardolph, and then they would begin their work on it.
So, in the original proposal from the Waldorf School, they want to make a little historical room there about the history, people's enchantment with the jail and the Arlo Guthrie tales and all of that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking one thing about plaques, the gift of the Proctors to that building, that plaque should stay in the building.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
The other smaller ones, this is a negotiable thing down the line. They haven't promised they're going to do this historical thing, but they think that people coming into their school building would be interested. And I think that's a nice thing to promote with them. We just don't have the picture yet on the actual transaction of the property. So I would be inclined, until there's some other place to put them, just leave them there, because they're not allowed to do anything inside the building right now.
No, the town still has control and ownership of the building.
Yeah,
We've given them access to the building to do for their architects and that, to do their
correct.
analysis of the building, but that's it. Once we get notification, the rest, then we're gonna have to go in and figure out what we're doing as far as what just needs to go and what needs to come back to the other town hall or wherever we're gonna store any of the stuff. I know quite a bit was taken out, but we do need to think about what else out of there needs to come.
Well, we could make that an agenda item down the line too, because there would be concerns about things that people might think were not important. However, I'm a person to err on the side of keeping it, because it has more meaning to people beyond us sometimes than to ourselves. If we destroy the evidence, then no one will know anything. So, which brings me back to, do we have a space at the town hall that we could put any of these plaques and small objects and fragments that are floating around right now?
Well, the good news, yes, only because we recently had a tenant that's left. And right now, one of my thoughts was not to rent that room out until we know what's happening with Proctor Hall, because what we might want to do is just use that room as a temporary depository of whatever comes from Proctor Hall.
Well, I think also, if you're going to put the stuff in the room, someone needs to start kind of a list of what's in there, so we don't have this
No, there's going to be nothing in the room. The room's is emptied.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We'll give it a table or something, but I think corral these items so they're not in people's offices. That's really dangerous, because
yes,
there's no security in that.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see a really concerted effort, at some point, even putting some things in the vault if necessary. I don't know how full the vault is right now. But I think one of our next meetings, we need to be looking at our records, both computer and otherwise, and see what the future is of all this town history.
Yeah.
Because once we're not around, no one will have any idea. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so that, the next thing that we had worked on was the Soldiers Monument. And so I think we're at a conclusion there.
Yep. The work's been done on the Soldiers Monument. Allegron and Amanda from, I'm trying to remember the name of her company that oversaw it. So the work's been done. I know one thing that was asked, and maybe this committee knows. I had Harold French tell me that there was supposed to be a lights put in to illuminate the monument.
And at what point was that?
I have no idea. I was wondering if this committee had any idea of,
I could ask Harold French that. I think the number one next thing is for us to get some kind of a reproduction fence around it, so that any planting that is anticipated by somebody could be outside the fence, but also we can hang wreaths on the fence, which is historically the way these occasions have been honored. There's several really good photographs of the fences. We don't have to have one as large as it once had, because remember, it had a lot of green space around it. But I think the protection from lawn mowing equipment and random vandalism, giving it a little distance and space around it would be a great idea.
Why don't I see if Amanda could, if through her group, could come up with plans for what fencing we'd want to put up around it. That would be appropriate.
She probably has the pictures that we pulled out. There's one that shows it very distinctly in a postcard. The others have an awful lot of people around them, particularly around the time when it was opened and celebrated. So
I think Maria has those photos. She's sent them to me in the past. I probably have them too.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Maria's got the queen of postcard there. I mean, she's got them all. I think Harold has a great memory about things, but sometimes he can't attach a date to it. So I like what he's saying, but I'd much rather get a fence in there before it's illuminated. It's one more thing that wouldn't be very useful in the snow.
Well, one thing that we could do is if we want to consider putting some lighting in there, and nowadays, instead of putting in lighting that is having to run electrical and the rest, we could look at just some solar lights that would just come on when it's dark and then pull them during the winter and then put them back out for the rest of the season, if that's something we want to consider. And
I put it as a lower priority than the fence, because we really want to protect all this work.
Well, the difference is the fence needs a little bit more planning on what we're going to put in for a fence. The solar lights probably within a couple of weeks we could put up, but
I think
I don't think there's much use in doing it this year. I would say if you're interested in lighting it, we could very easily light it if that's the desire.
If Amanda could come up with, she'll know better the companies that produce this stuff. It could even be aluminum. It does not have to be cast iron. They're really great reproductions now. So we could maybe put an application into the preservation funds for that.
Yeah.
And that would be a good completion of this whole monument project. Okay, so I'm going to make a note, Amanda. Will you contact her?
I will contact Amanda and let her know. If you guys do have pictures of the fencing, if you can send it to me, then I will send to Amanda the pictures and ask her if she could assist us in finding a company to replicate that type of fence.
There's probably a lot out there to Google too.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we went to the town cemetery. And Peter, you probably have the updates, right? with the
Yes,
sergeant?
Preservation Inc. is going to be back on site again, doing more work in September and or early October. I think they are going, I mean, Michael, you probably know this better than me. I think they're going to go ahead with working on the Sedgwick tombs, doing the next step in that proposed. Is that right?
Yeah, they have 2 more cleaning dates set where they're going to do, which we'll be looking for volunteers and the rest, September and October. They're also doing a 2-day training with the highway department on how to reset the old stones in the old section, to go over with the highway staff what they should be doing to maintain these items, and then what we do when they start to lean and stuff. So, the proper etiquette you should use when fixing these. So there's a pair of dates for those that they're going to be coming out. So the work there is continuing. Then we'll be moving ahead with the sergeant tombs and the rest. So yeah, there's a lot of work still to be done on it, but we are progressing along in that regard.
Great. And was there any consensus on whether they were going to try to make these table tombs again, or?
I think that's still to be determined. The proposal they gave the Cemetery Commission had multiple steps, and it's kind of do one step, see what you find, then do another step, see what you find, and stop and reconsider after each step. So I believe it's possible that after this next step, they may have a sense of what the heck is underneath those tombs, and for example, maybe there are posts. We're not holding our breath, but you never know.
I know even if there's posts,
Oh, no.
they're still concerned about the posts are very easy to be vandalized, very easy to they don't work. I know they're thinking that it would be setting the stones up onto like basically almost like a foundation, like a house, so that they sit on it. So they're much more secure and won't break and that. But there's still some things they need to do as far as even seeing if the legs are even an option and that. But I know they were leaning toward not using the legs. That was my conversation with them, even if they could find them.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah. I think
They
that
obviously failed once.
they're very careful to document this, not only from the archaeological standpoint, but historically, because when they have this open, this is the one time we get to know how it was originally, based on fragments or whatever else they find. So I think we can look to them to, give us that piece of history anyway.
Yes.
Okay. Well, then we were on to the Stone Arch Bridge. Curtisville. So I had spoken to Michael about the fact that another person had been brought in to look at the bridge. And do you think you could fill us in a little more on that?
Right. So I would say the last 18 to 24 months, we've had a lot of activity on that bridge ever since I did close it completely with fencing. A lot of people want to know what we're going to do, what's going to happen. So the select board held a meeting probably now about 4 months ago where we were looking at a couple options, and now we've expanded. So, the first one's going to sound the most extreme, but we have to remember that if we don't do something, time's going to take care of that bridge on its own. It's getting undermined. Water is getting underneath the foundation facing the White House. We have wing walls that are failing, and time is going to be honest, it's going to take the bridge down. So what are our options? So, the option I know this committee I would assume wouldn't be interested in is the removal of the bridge, creating a pedestrian bridge over the utility bridge that's there, and allowing people to have a walking loop around there. That's one of the options. The wing walls, you'd have to put some sheathing in to protect the foundations of the houses on either side, and the bridge is gone. That is one option that's being looked at. The second option was the one that was proposed, and I believe this committee was aware of it, was the taking down the bridge, using the stones, pouring new wing walls and creating a new vehicle bridge, and using the stones within the bridge to create the facade of a stone arch bridge. But it would be a modern Chapter 90 bridge accommodating for traffic. The last one, the newest one, is we had a company come out and take a look at it, and what they are considering is whether or not, so behind the stone arch itself is dirt and the blacktop of the road. They're talking about whether if we were to remove the blacktop, remove the dirt, would they be able to then pour into form cement to hold the stone arch as is, creating a foundation within the stone arch bridge in order for it to be supported. This wouldn't allow it to become a vehicle bridge, but would allow it to possibly become a pedestrian bridge. So I'm actually going to be proposing tomorrow night to the board to allocate the $14,000 for this study to be done. They need to look at, there's all different borings and the rest, and they need to look at the undermining and the rest to figure out if this option is feasible or if the bridge has gone too far from when it was first looked at. Because even in 2015 they had, and I sent them all the plans, this company, because they talked about pinnings, which was actually something that was proposed back in 2015, of putting pins through that would hold the bridge and then cement behind it. So, this one would be the one that would maintain a stone arch bridge on that location.
Now, could I just get the update here? When you said a new party, is this the person that Patrick White had commented about in his
Yes.
message to the constituents? Okay, so
Yep.
this is where I want to make absolutely sure, when these things come up in the future, could the historical commission be clued in at the beginning? Because we have a big stake in this, having taken our $50,000 prize from the Secretary of the Commonwealth. And I don't think we want to disappoint Secretary Galvin. We want to continue to get rewards for what we do. So let's make sure that we do that so that everyone has that information up front. It's a town thing.
Right now, so the only thing that's thrown out there is the fact that Patrick went and put it in his little note thing. There is no plan right now, other than the fact is there is this concept that may be able to save the bridge. And without doing some engineering analysis, we don't even know if that's an option. So at this point, it's just looking into it. I know I'm operating on the assumption that the 10-year restriction will be lifted in 2025, because that's when the deed restriction on the property lifts, and then the town will be able to make its own decision on what to do with the bridge moving forward. So, yeah.
Well, since our original concept was to have these engineering studies, and they have sort of come into conflict, I think, with different people, whether it was Mass Historical Commission or I cannot even remember at this point without looking at my notes, which I don't have here with me in Maine, about other parties who objected to some of the techniques proposed. So clearly a consensus will have to occur for it to progress at this point.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why we're looking at the three different options, which the facade bridge, maintaining a real stone arch bridge, or the removal of the bridge. And those are really I don't know what other options there are in that on it. So,
Michael, is
what
that
this is going to
option
do is
two?
allow us some options.
Michael, is that option 2? You mentioned Chapter 90, I think. Is that one that there might be state money for?
Yes, there's a possibility of, with the facade of the stone arch bridge, I'm sorry, it's not chapter 890, it's chapter 85 is bridge. Sorry. To build a chapter 85 bridge, there could be funding available from external sources. Any of the other two designs most likely would not have any ability to gain any other funding other than maybe the last one, if you wanted to put some type of restriction on it, maybe historical. But the money for historical tends to be, I think it's maximum of 200,000 right now on any individual project. And for a bridge project of this size, that wouldn't be a large amount of money. So,
well, they have been giving, Mass Historical has given recently, I noticed in their list, up to a bridge, I think in Abington, a stone bridge. They gave them 50,000. Don't know how big the bridge is, but
yeah.
I
In the
think it's
scale of projects, bridges are in the millions, and therefore 50, 100,000 is small. You know, if it's a chapter 85 bridge, there are from the small bridge program, which can be up to $600,000 to MassWorks grants, which can be up to the total, up to 75% of the cost of the entire bridge. So, yeah.
Michael, who is the company that would be doing this analysis for option 3?
And that one I would have had if I was in the office. So I don't mind shooting the committee a copy of their proposal that's going to the selectmen. So when I get in the office later, I'll shoot you a copy so you'll have the name. I don't remember offhand the name of the company.
That'd be great. Yeah, a copy of their proposal would be fabulous. Thank you.
Yep.
Thought of, you know, what you just pointed out is that the money to do a bridge is extensive. It's not, you know, like putting a brand new slate roof on the State House or something. So another program that has been used in Stockbridge, Save America's Treasures. We might want to look at that and see. I'm not aware of bridges specifically, but they do structures, and that's a lot of money. It's construction grade projects. So to look at that, and also we might want to be seeing our sister bridges over in the Middlefield area and see how they have managed these bridges, which ones are actually being used at this point, which ones are just to look at, you know, how they've maintained them. And, you know, it's the same construction. It's not the same person who built them, but the idea of that type of bridge. It's a whole family out there. Yeah.
I mean, the biggest challenge with ours, even looking at what other people have done, has been the lack of maintenance. There was definitely an extended period of time where there was no maintenance. I think it was the last maintenance done was 1997. There were pictures of it, of the work that was done.
I was there.
You were there? All right.
Yeah.
Then there was but even when they did that work, they had identified some other things that should be done. And then it looks as though from there until the time in 2012, when the state closed the bridge, there were numerous reports and bridge inspection reports and the rest of deficiencies that were happening. And yet no maintenance was done from 1997 to 2012, which led to the bridge closure, led to the original concept possible fix in 2015 from that planning grant. And then from 2015 to current, there's been nothing done. So, you know, the best way, and I'm sure I'm speaking to the choir here, the best way to make sure you don't get into this predicament is maintenance. And once you let it go, now once you decide to fix it, now you got to fix it to if you're not doing maintenance and you're doing actual repairs, you have to make the repairs to the standards that are today. If you had maintained it, you maintained it to the standards it was built. And yeah, that's.
I think it was in the 1990s, there was sort of a little breakdown there. And one of the things was that someone commented maybe after the fact, the engineering was kind of poor on the drainage concept, because if you have a shaped roadway, the water goes somewhere and it may not have been directed properly. So I think the opinions, when you look at stone and how quickly it deteriorates just from the water dripping on it, you know, imagine an entire, what we have over there, the big package. So I think the more opinions we can get, the better. And
Yeah,
also the main,
and time is of the essence now because
yes, it
there
is.
there is showing some splitting and some pulling apart of the bridge underneath.
Yes.
And if we don't, time is going to take care of that, is going to lift all decisions from us if we don't.
Well, if we could put the oar in the water again and just say a maintenance plan for whatever comes out of this
Yes.
is going to be part of the project. So,
Yes.
and one that's readable, easy, and has phases in it, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3, every year,
Yep.
every other year, whatever.
Right.
I think that would be a huge help. Okay, so we don't spend our entire concern here. The Tuckerman Bridge.
Yep.
That you had mentioned, and we had also in our last agenda.
So the Tuckerman Bridge, the great thing about the Tuckerman Bridge is the two foundations that the Tuckerman Bridge sits on are both usable and in great condition. So the bore sampling and everything else that was done showed that they were in great shape. And those are the historical elements of the oldest part of the bridge. The superstructure, the metal superstructure, is just a metal frame bridge. There's really nothing unique about the superstructure, but the foundations are stone set, which you don't see that anymore. So the good news is that those are in good shape. The one bad news was they don't go down and sit on bedrock. They're still on sand. So what's going to happen is we're actually going to pour behind them basically a slab down to bedrock to hold behind them to put the structure of the bridge on and that, but then we'll be also tying in those foundations. So, you know, that was good news that we could reuse those. So,
Well,
yeah.
that's a plus.
Yep.
Okay, so there's no danger of that being closed or anything like that at this point.
Well, the bridge itself was following the similar classes Curtisville. It kept getting downgraded for weight classes. And what happens is the state continually drops it until they get to the point they go close it. So what we're doing is we're getting all of our ducks in a row so that we close the bridge for about an 18-month period to fix the bridge, restore it, and then reopen it. So, and that will mean a whole new decking. But like I said, the steel top there's nothing unique about the steel top itself. That will be replaced.
Yeah, they're not a lot of them, but okay. All right, so that could be 18 months of closure.
That will be 18 months of closure.
Oh, okay, good. That's stuff. Okay.
When it happens, but what it won't be is the state closing it and then us spending a year or two designing a new bridge, doing the hydrology, doing all that. Then 18, 24 months of construction. You know, that we're ahead of the game by saying, okay, let's get all the designs done. Let us close it for the repair instead of the state closing it and then spending years trying to figure out how to repair it.
Okay. Well, that will make people happier.
Yeah. Way to go.
And that one I've
Controls.
applied for a MassWorks grant to assist with the cost. I've applied for a couple others. So we'll see what comes out of that one. We also had funding already in place to do it, but I do know the way prices are skyrocketing that we'll see if that still holds. But we are searching in a number of different ways. And the Second Everett Road Bridge, I don't know if we talked about that last time, is in design.
Yeah, that was next year.
All right, I'll wait till you call upon that.
What's the time frame for the Tuckerman Bridge?
So right now we're in design engineering right now. Then it will be submitted to the state bridge inspection unit for their comments and review. That usually can take up to a year. And then we would go out to bid on the project. That would take probably about lining up everything about 3 months. And then we would close it for the construction period as the superstructure would be removed, the necessary work would be done, and the new bridge would be assembled. So altogether, you're probably looking at 36 months, so 3 years.
And the funding, you have town funding put aside now, is what you're saying?
Yes. We asked originally under the original estimate of about $2 million to rebuild the Tuckerman, because when you're not dealing with foundations and footings and all that, and you're just dealing with the steel superstructure, really it's them bringing in, the hardest part will be them bringing in the larger beams that they're going to just basically put right across the entire river. And then they'll build the steel superstructure on top of it and then put a paved road on it. You know, it's amazing to think that that bridge actually could cost less than the Curtisville. But once you get into the foundations, that's where that bridge would have skyrocketed. If we couldn't reuse those foundations, you're talking now, you know, $4 or $6 million more, because that's the work where you have to block the river, you have to, you know, everything else to put in new foundations. So cost wise and everything, it was incredibly important that the bridge itself, that we were only dealing with that steel superstructure. And,
So as far as the metal part goes, the current railings and configuration on top, that will go back, right?
Of the Curtisville or the Tuckerman?
Tuckerman. It's metal, right?
Yeah, it's just a steel
Railings?
metal. Yeah, it would be an all new superstructure.
Okay, so we're not retaining the historic bridge structure.
No, we're retaining the original historic foundations. The
the underwater part. I want to talk about the top.
Water too. It's the stone piers that basically the bridge sits on. That is the historic. That bridge was replaced anyway, I believe. I forget the year that it was. It's not. Is that the original bridge?
I thought it was, because it has been touted as being unusual.
I think there was an old bridge there before.
That could have been wood, but anything past, you know, now we're talking 50 years is old. That's historic. So it's very possible that it went in there in the 1880s or the 1890s. And I think I'm going to look at the National Register nomination.
All right.
Because Tuckerman's Bridge is the end of our National Register Historic District there. It is in the historic district. So,
all right.
Who knows?
Yeah, I guess I wasn't aware of anything historic about that bridge. As far as unusual design or the rest, I know the Butler Bridge is a very historic bridge with a very unique architectural build to it.
That's a different, so here's what we're going to do. After we close the meeting, we all take a vacay. We'll look at our National Register nomination and we can Google it. Also do the Google Maps and see if it's deemed historic, it will be on that map.
All right.
You know, the big picture map. So those are tools that are really helpful to people like us. Okay.
Michael, was the plan, as you are thinking of it now, to, I think you've said, replace the metal superstructure, would it end up basically looking the same as it does now?
It would look very similar to what's there now. Yes.
Okay. Here we go. Let's put a flag on this one and make sure that we're careful about this, because you don't want to get called out on this after the fact.
Right. We should know if it's in the state.
Absolutely need to know that.
We'll scope it out.
So there, a couple of things. One thing that has been dangling for some time, when we had Stuart Saginaw come to Stockbridge, he spoke about having a community preservation plan, which is not about historic preservation. It's about an all-encompassing thing that includes our open space and other resources, and that may be a requirement that the towns have it in order to get other funding. So I want to make sure that that kind of moves forward with the selectmen, so they understand it's not just about things historic. It's a town-wide plan to give us a consensus of what our town should be and continue to be. So other towns have done it. We've looked at some samples. I confess that the one I looked at, I didn't get all the way through, but I think we need to keep that as a high priority.
That was the CPC one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
that-
every town is supposed to have
right.
when you have
Well,
a committee. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know we're putting together some things like we're doing grant assurance agreements and the rest that are once again things we're supposed to do. So yeah, having a CPC plan is something the CPC committee could just, what I could do is look at figuring out what the cost would be and then putting a proposal. I don't think it's even necessarily the select board. I think it's more of the CPC committee itself.
Well, we would not be using our money. It's town money. The town has to come to the table with this because the components that I just spoke about of the community preservation funding are also overall goals for most towns in Massachusetts because most towns are historic.
Right.
But in fact, it's a good way. We don't have an open space plan. We don't have
A master plan.
master plan. So this is a good bridge the gap and cover the bases. I mean, we have a banker's box full of material that committee, open space committee, which I served on, gathered. And I think a lot of it might be irrelevant at this point. So we'd like to kind of go forward, I think, from that moment.
All right.
It's a great tool for consensus. I'm going to use that word carefully because I think people have to buy into it because they care. And we know people care. It's just getting them on board, organized.
Yeah. I guess I didn't realize that one had to come from town money, couldn't come from CPC funds.
There's not very much money in that account to do that kind of thing. And also, I think one of the things you can't do is a report. It would have to be under the administrative funds. We could spend up to $5,000 if we want to do that.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking it's important enough for the whole town, to buy into that. So.
All right.
It would just give us another benchmark of progress and love for our place.
Yeah.
All right. So, Peter or Maria, can you think of anything else?
I think we interrupted Michael when he was just going to give us a little brief update on the Everett Road Bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Everett Road Bridge is in design phase. It's in the Mass Small Bridge Program. And once the design is done, then it will move into then I can put the application in for the construction phase, which can be up to $600,000 of funding for that bridge. It'll be designed very similar to the one that was already put in. So, and I know that.
Door.
Yeah, right beside it. I know that's bothered. Be aware that now when you're talking about bridges that transport vehicles, I know one thing that's bothered a couple people are the size of the guardrails that are like at that Everett Road Bridge. If you look at that small little one, if you put a vehicle bridge over the Curtisville, if you put a vehicle bridge, well, when we do the one on the Tuckerman, you have to have those type of guardrails. Those are just the requirements of a current bridging system. So under the standards. So, that definitely affects the look of the bridge and the design of the bridge, that you have to build these bridges based around that. So yeah. Next time you're going by, take a look if you haven't noticed how big the guardrails are compared to what was there before. Yeah.
Whatever happened to the old, I don't know if you'd call them guardrails, but fencing that was there next to the bridge? Because that was originally made in the factory that was there at where the park is now.
Yeah. Where are some of these
Maria mentioned
architectural?
those in our 2022 meeting, I see. I'm looking at the minutes.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I don't think I know I don't know what happened with it.
They were gonna save them and possibly use them to put in the park. They couldn't use them along the road or anything, but to save the history of them, they were gonna put them along the edge of the park or something.
All right, I'll have to check to see where those ended up.
They're very
So-
similar to the ones on the Curtisville Bridge.
Yeah, and they were
Right.
made by the same people.
And the same
And-
posts, the same
and I know even
rods,
the
bars.
Curtisville, no matter what bridge it is, that rail system will have to be a proper rail system put in. That's one of the things, like I said, if you put in a vehicle bridge, that rail system cannot, because that rail system won't prevent a car from won't even bump a car from preventing it from going over. Pedestrian, maybe I'll to build it into something that would meet, the proper standard. Or like you said, take it off the bridge and use it beside the bridge somewhere where it's not actual fall prevention.
Okay, well, it's a big issue. It's a conflict, taking historic preservation funds and then say, oh no, we have to have it like a real highway bridge. And, we know all highway bridges now are constructed very differently for a lot of reasons. Now, vehicles that we have now are not the same as they were at the time. So,
Right. Well, and that's I'm more referring if we replace the bridge instead of, if we do the last one, we'd ask them how can we tie in that system, but still have to make it so it meets enough of a standard, even as a pedestrian bridge, that a person won't lean on it and it won't fall over. It's got to be
So that's just something to keep in mind in terms of these other artifacts that are mostly architectural and a lot less, plaque sized. What happened to the molds for the fountain and all these other things that have been going on? There needs to be a repository and some kind of inventory of it so people know what it is. Not everything is good for scrap. A lot of it's good for history. So you have to remember too that contractors in many, many cases, which I learned by doing a fence study once upon a time on the other side of the state, it's the contractor's right to have all the metal and scrap it.
Yeah,
or
unless we
used to his
identify.
purpose, unless it's identified. So that's something in these contracts that you have to keep your eye on.
Right.
Shocking, but true. All right. I don't know. Were any other items, Peter, Maria, that you can think of?
No,
I
That we
don't
sh-
have any. You, Maria?
no, I think we covered everything.
That's good. Well, we'll follow up on, I'll get some minutes out and we'll follow up on some of these items we discussed.
Okay.
And then
Right.
once I get those reports of, especially on the Curtisville, the 3 different designs, and what'll be evaluated, definitely have this committee have everybody needs to weigh in on that. It's really the town's decision on what it's going to do and that.
Now, are these 3 versions that you're talking about, are these commensurate with your PowerPoint presentation that you did
Yeah.
before? Okay.
Yeah, except adding the last one, which is actually the possibility of saving the bridge as a stone arch bridge, as a true
Okay, the
stone
number
arch
3.
bridge. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the one that's now in play, and I know a lot of people are excited, but I did caution Patrick by putting it out there. It's created an expectation of now we can save it, and I said, well, they still need to do the bores. They still need to do the analysis of the bridge integrity and the rest. They just came out and did a visual look. So now's the meat and potatoes. Can the bridge be saved as a stone arch bridge historically? Because the other one is just creating the facade of the old bridge and that.
And I'm sorry, that's which alternative?
That's option 2, right?
Number 2 is
2.
just the facade, and that's the one that
Okay.
Mass Historic was very clear about. They are not interested in the facade of a bridge or reusing the stone. The original bridge is gone. So they wouldn't like 1 or 2. those only come into play after the deed restriction lifts on the bridge.
Well, this is going to be kind of the come to Jesus moment and compromise and, being out there with a very good plan and explanation. I'm
Yeah.
sure that Mass Historical Commission could be, I don't want to say persuaded, but urged to consider the alternatives in this case, because a big pile of stone in the middle of a river, I don't think so. I think there are ways to do this, but it takes a little bit of diplomacy, and that's something to think about.
Mass Historical is well aware of where it's at, and basically when the deed restriction, then we do what the town decides to do, and that. So I'm hoping that the port idea behind is feasible, and we're not to a point that the bridge too far along, and then there is a possibility we all get what we want, which would be keeping a stone arch bridge, and it would be, but like I said, it would be pedestrian only. I think the conflict will come in is if that cost is greater than a vehicle bridge, there are people pushing for it to be reopened as a vehicle bridge. And then it becomes it'll become that debate between the two. And then there might be some people that go, spend the least amount of money and just put a pedestrian bridge and let the other one go. But
Also,
the bottom line is we need to make a decision. We can't let it sit for another 10, 12 years because time will decide the whole thing on us.
we really have a 2-year deadline right now. And it's important to remember that if this is any kind of a voting situation with Mass Historical Commission, that commission has people from every town in the Commonwealth practically, like regionally. So it's a larger group of people than the 2 or 3 that might come to visit. So we need to make the plan appealing. And I think it sounds to me like the numbers, when they are solid and come in, they might help people understand why this is something you can't just do overnight. And they might be able to balance it better in their own, thinking about finance. We'll see. I don't know. That's what I think, but
it'll be the price tag, because my understanding was the big thing about the restoration before was if they were going to take the bridge down and rebuild it as a stone arch bridge was $6 to $8 million in 2015, which put it at almost 3 times the cost of a road bridge. So
I'll have to look at those numbers again, because I have to say I phased out on it after several million, but I think it's not going to be cheap either way. So everybody will.
It's not going to, but hopefully this one is not as drastically different from the vehicle bridge to a pedestrian, but keeping the history, which then definitely says which option does the town want and that.
Yeah, well, that would be great if it proves feasible. So I'm glad you're putting it before the select board to get the feasibility study done, and let's see what it turns up.
Yep.
And thank you for sending us that when you get to the office, the proposal.
Yep.
Okay, I'm thinking we've covered our bases for today.
Sounds good. I move we adjourn here at 11:32.
Second it.
Too. All right. Well, thank you, Michael.
In favor, Linda?
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.